Howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today, thin clients. What are they? What are they used for? And why the hell do I need one? Well, stay tuned, watch the rest of the video, and we'll both find out. So if you don't already know it by now, I am the king of cheap, and I should say frugal. Frugal's probably a better word. My father was a child of the Depression, and so he taught me to squeeze a buffalo nickel till it pooped, get the most out of your money, and I apply that in my personal as well as my business dealings. So when clients come to me, usually their biggest complaint is about how much money they think they have to spend on IT. And in order to get a good system in for a small to medium business, you don't need to spend a lot of money. Your money is better spent on paying people like me to maintain things and keep it up and running for you than it is to buy a lot of fancy equipment you really don't need in the small business environment. That being said, the machine behind me right now is approximately 9 to 10 years old. It's an Intel Core 2 Duo or dual core processor and 2 gig of RAM, 500 gig hard drive, nothing special. But it won't run the newer versions of Windows 10 past about 1703. As well, it shouldn't be expected to. But I can't go to a client and justify them spending $500 to $800 per PC to upgrade just in order to run Windows 10. The better solution for this client was to start virtualizing some of their Windows 10 machines onto a big beefy Dell server that I leased to them, and that's what I did. But I wanted to be able to use, they have about 5 or 6 of these older machines behind me here left, and I want to get some use out of them. And my first thought was to just put Windows 7 on them and then the RDP software. But I came up with a better solution, and I'm about to share that with you right now. So the situation I have with a specific client is they've got a lot of old, and when I say old, I mean old. This machine is probably, the one you're looking at is 10 years old. It's an Intel motherboard. It's a DG31PR, which is quite an old board. I think it came out in 2010. It's got a Core 2 Duo, and it's only got 2 gig of RAM. And then I threw a 500 gig serial ATA hard drive in there. So it's not a very powerful system. What it is good for, though, is being a thin client. There's a couple options with thin clients. I could go out and buy used thin clients for about 80 or 90 bucks, but it's a pain in the ass, really, to set up the software on a thin client. And I just think it's really overkill. We have all these machines laying around. We have, I'd say this one client has 4 or 5 of these, maybe 6 of these machines laying around. They're still good purpose. They'll even run Windows 10. I believe it or not, I've run Windows 10 on these with 2 gig of RAM. I don't recommend it, but as Windows 10 upgrades continue, this won't run Windows 10. And the customer right now does not want to spend between $500 and $800 on a new PC that'll run Windows 10. That's why we put that Dell server in at this client and lease that Dell server to him, and then put Windows 10 in virtual machines on that Dell because they run really well in that environment. Then the idea is to make these dumb terminals that just simply connect up and through RDP and connect up to the Dell and run the virtual machines. So we've been playing around with software on these. My thought was we'll just slap Windows 7 on them, Windows 7 Pro, because you need that or higher to run RDP. But anyway, so I thought we'd just put Windows 7 on them, set them up as dumb terminals. If they reboot, have them come up, automatically log in, and then run Windows RDP, remote desktop, and then you type in the computer name on the server you want to connect to, and bing bang boom, you're done. The problem is installing Windows 7 on each one of these units and all the updates probably takes a good hour and a half to 2 hours. Now, the machines are similar, so I could just make one Windows 7 image and then clone it to the rest of the machines, but in experimenting with Linux, I found that I can install Linux Mint 18 with the Cinnamon desktop on these units. They run fine. They run fine on the RAM. The install with updates takes less than 15-20 minutes, and then another 10 or 15 minutes to configure the units using Ramana, or whatever the hell you want to call it, as a remote desktop client to connect up either to a Windows 7 or Windows 10 virtual machine, and it works remarkably well, as I'm about to show you. But I just wanted you to see the kind of hardware we're running on. And I have replaced the power supply in this. It's got a new, new to it, Antec 450 watt power supply. They're really good power supplies. Antec makes great products. But just so you see, it is a Core 2 Duo, and again, only 2 gig of RAM. This motherboard will support up to 4 gig of RAM. It is a 64-bit compatible motherboard, so I put a 64-bit version of Linux Mint Cinnamon desktop on here. And the beauty of that is it also gives this client kind of a segue into the world of Linux. So if they just want to sit at this terminal and type up a simple letter or something like that, we have full connectivity to the network, and they would be able to use the LibreOffice suite to do simple tasks. They can browse the web on the thing. What they'll probably be doing is just booting up the machine. It'll stay on most of the time. They'll boot up to it. It'll go right into the virtual machine. The other thing we did was enabled desktop support on this, so that using VNC, I can get into this machine remotely if anything were to happen to it. Or say, for example, we have a new client that sits at this machine and they need to log into a different virtual machine. It just gives me the ability to log on to this machine running Linux, make the changes I need to Ramina to create a new shortcut to it, their RDP, and they're up and running. Now, there's nothing fancy with this machine. As you can still see, it still has the DIN connectors for the keyboard and mouse. It's got a simple VGA controller on there, USB 2 ports. It's got a Realtek gigabit network card, and then a Realtek onboard audio, and that's pretty much it, and the power supply, and that's pretty much all there is to this machine, but it gets the job done. So you know that I've been playing around with Linux, and I'm slowly switching my operations here over to run Linux desktops in my corporate environment, in my business environment, and there's various reasons for that. I'm just kind of tired of all the games that Microsoft plays with Windows 10. Just the other day I was so frustrated why a Windows 10 machine was running so slow, and it turned out it was OneDrive loading in the background. Microsoft's also doing other things like loading software onto your machines without your knowledge or permission, like games and that kind of thing. I've run across it. And if you're like me, I just need my system to work. My clients are like that as well. They just want their computers to work. So we could have gone with Windows 7 thin clients, but I wanted to try Linux. And since I've been playing around with all these versions of Linux, the distribution I've come to settle on for the most part is Linux Mint 18 with the Cinnamon desktop. So what I've done to that machine behind me is installed Linux Mint 18 Cinnamon desktop on there, and I'm going to show you how I use it as a virtual, as a dumb terminal or a thin client to connect up and run my Windows 7 and Windows 10 desktops remotely. Now, first things first, there's a couple of things you need to do. That is, you need to load Linux Mint Cinnamon, and you need to enable their desktop sharing. The other thing you need to do is to turn off the encryption on the desktop sharing if you're going to make your life easy. We're within our LAN. These machines are not available on the internet, so I don't see any need to encrypt the connection between the terminal and my machine. So what I've done is enabled desktop sharing on that Linux Mint machine behind me, and I have used VNC Viewer to create a shortcut to that machine, or a connection to that machine. So if I right click on it and come down here to properties, I've got the IP address of my server, or of the machine behind me. I've given it a name. The encryption I let VNC server choose. I just keep the defaults for all the other options. So if I double click on this now, it'll tell me the connection to that server will not be encrypted. I have set up a password on there, so I'm going to go ahead and enter that. And now, as you can see, I have the Linux Mint desktop up in front of me here in VNC Viewer. I'll go ahead and expand that. Now, I have already done all the updates on this Linux Mint machine, so let me see if I can find the system information here and show you what is running. And it's probably, here we are, system info. So this is Linux Mint 18.3 Cinnamon 64-bit. Cinnamon is version 3.6.7. The Linux kernel 4.15.0-32. It is an Intel Pentium dual CPU E2180, two 2 GHz processors, 2 GB RAM, and a 475 GB hard drive, and of course the Intel AD2G33/G31 integrated graphics controller. And that's one of the things I really like about Linux Mint. It just worked. I just installed it and it found everything it needed and it worked. I did need to come out here to the desktop. Let's see if we type it in under desktop sharing. I did set these settings, allow users to view and control. Take this tick mark off that you must confirm each access, otherwise it'll prompt you on the machine. Someone will have to be there. Then I set up a password for people to connect with it, and that was pretty much it. Now Linux Mint also comes with, you know, a bunch of applications bundled in. You've got GIMP in there, Pix, you've got the LibreOffice suite. Now this is an older version, it's version 5 of the LibreOffice suite. But you have a basic word processor and a spreadsheet editor, you know, just similar to Google Docs or even Microsoft Office. Sound and video, some admin tools, etc. But for the most part, the user won't be using any of that. They'll just basically, what we want to do is configure this machine to auto log in and just sit here. And then we'll train the customer to go out and use a program called Ramina. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But you just basically install Ramina and you install the RDP package for Ramina. And then I've set up a couple of connections to remote desktops. I have a Windows 7 remote desktop and I have a Windows 10 remote desktop. So let me right click on there and go to edit, and you'll be able to see that you give it a name here. You can group them together. The protocol we're going to connect with is remote desktop protocol. You can put in the IP address of the virtual machine or the machine you want to connect to. I've gone ahead and put a username in there, skipped the password. I've set the domain to MCS, and then I've set my color depth at true color 32 BPP. Now be aware, when you connect up to a Windows 7 machine with Ramina, I have not been able to get the Aero desktop to work, but that's a trivial problem to have. Most of the users that I have that are going to be using virtual machines are not going to be concerned about the Aero desktop. It's not really concerned. They just basically want to get on, do word processing, browse the internet, that kind of thing. Now under the Advanced tab, I did change the quality to Best. Okay. Now it's kind of counterintuitive. Normally they start with poor, the fastest, but I want the best. I have a high bandwidth. I have a gigabit connection to my virtual machine, so speed I want to be the best, or the quality I want to be the best. So basically what I do is just double click on the connection here, enter my super secret password, click OK. Now you might, on your initial connection, you might get a certificate warning. You just go ahead and accept the certificate and you're fine. And so now you can see under Linux, I'm connecting up to a Windows 7 virtual machine, and I can go out and I can run applications just like I would on any other Windows machine. I can run Office Word, I could run Excel. You get the idea. You've seen virtual machines running before. There you go, there's Excel. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to minimize that. There's Excel, and here's Word. We'll finish that, leave that alone. So I have my full desktop. I can browse the internet if I need to. I can bring Chrome up. So there you go. I mean, it doesn't get much simpler than that. It just works. And that's what I like. Now, the one thing I haven't tested on here is remote printing, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. This is more of a proof of concept kind of thing that we're testing here for moving forward with clients that have older machines but still want to be able to run Windows 10 and get the features out of Windows 10. So let me go ahead and connect up to the Windows 10 by double clicking. Again, I enter my super secret password, and then I will have my Windows 10 desktop up here in a moment. Takes a little bit longer to log into Windows 10, but eventually it will present me with a desktop. And there you go. And just like any other Windows program, I can come in here. Now I've put the classic start menu on here, so you'll see that I have it's easier to get around in the menu, but there's Microsoft Excel, and then I can run let's go ahead and run Windows Word, Microsoft Word, etc., etc. So just like I was sitting in front of the machine. There you go. And then to get out, you just come here to the start button, click on log out, and then bing bang boom. Eventually it will log out and we'll be back to our Linux desktop. So, you know, it's pretty simple. Now, installing Linux meant on this old machine doing all the updates, setting up remote desktop sharing, installing Ramina and configuring it, all told, took about 30 minutes. My business partner and I did it this week. We've been doing some classes on it and getting familiar with Linux Mint. We've done it on multiple machines, and each time the install was trivial. It was very simple to do. And as you can see, it just works. We had some minor little annoyances. We had to go and search some articles on the internet to figure it out, but it just worked. And that's the beauty of Linux. You know, when you get it to work, it works really well. It's going to be stable. And this is a great temporary solution for my clients so that they can save their pennies up to get new machines that'll run Windows 10 natively. But not all their users need a powerful machine, so why spend the money? That can be better spent on reinvesting into the company, payroll, bonuses for people. So anytime I can save my customers money, I love to do it. And I just treat their business like I would mine. How would I run my business? How would I spend my dollars in IT wisely? And I think this is a wise thing to do. Now, keep in mind, we tried the same thing with Windows 7. Windows 7 is great. In fact, if I could get away with running Windows 7, I would probably go back to it, but I digress. On this same machine, it took about 20 minutes to install Windows 7 from a USB key, and then it took another 4 to 6 hours to install the updates for Windows 7. And that's just unacceptable. It's just freakishly long install. Now, Linux is not a big target for virus and hackers, and that's why you have more updates on Windows than you do on Linux. And I know I could have simply set up, since all these machines are the same, I could have set up an image of Windows 7 on this machine. I could have sysprepped it, and then I could have created an image and just cloned that image onto other hard drives. And it would have been a trivial process, and I could have set up an assembly line. But you see how simple it was. Well, I'm telling you how simple it was to install Linux Mint, and it works. Now, like I said, we did have some initial configuration issues, but we got them resolved, and we're still in the process of testing this. But this makes a lot of sense for a thin client. Instead of them having to go out and buy thin clients, basically a thin client is one of these machines with an SD drive, with an SD card in it. So, why not utilize what you have? Like I said, these machines are close to 10 years old behind me. In fact, The company I used to work for built this computer for this client years ago, and it's been running Windows 10 up until after 1703. On Windows 10 it was running fine, and then it just got too old to run it, but it'll run a virtual machine just fine. Now this device that I'm holding up right here is an HP, we'll put it right side up. This is an HP thin client, and this is a model EP-216. Now in theory I can put Linux on this. It comes with Windows 7 embedded, I believe. And if you've ever used one of these HP thin clients, their software is kludgy at best. I've set this up and configured it, and was not real pleased with how you configure the software. It just seems really convoluted and complex when it doesn't need to be. So my next task is, I think I picked this up on eBay for 30 or 40 bucks. These things you can pick them up cheap, and they're really powerful units. In fact, this one even has USB 3 ports. I don't know if you can see that. See the blue ports on it? So this would make an excellent thin client if I could run Linux on it, or if I could run an operating system on it that isn't tied to HP's. HP likes to really overcomplicate their software. I just want this to be able to run a piece of software. So I'm going to check into putting Linux Mint Cinnamon on here as well, running it as a thin client with Linux on it. And if that proof of concept works, then this is an alternative to those bigger units up there. These will even mount. They have VESA mounts, so they will even mount to the back of a monitor, and then all you have is your network connection and your USB. I believe this unit also has it has DVI out, and it also has, what is that damn video standard called? You see what I'm saying? It's not HDMI, it's that digital video standard, and then it has a gigabit Ethernet card in it as well. So we will be putting this to task. It's on our project list to do this fall, because I want to see what kind of performance we can get out of these, because I've got a lot of my clients can really save a ton of money by using these devices as opposed to a full-blown PC, and then just run their operating system virtually. So as I use Linux more and more, I'm finding out that I like it, but I am also finding out it has some limitations, serious limitations. Well, I should rephrase that. They're not really limitations, it's just I have to learn how to make things perform in Linux like they do in Windows. For example, configuring a network card is much simpler in Windows and adding it to a VLAN than it is in Linux. In Linux you have to add software, you have to go out to the command line. I mean, it's not beyond me, but it's just not something that I want to do right now. You see my mouse pointer moving back there on that monitor? That's me in my remote session, in fact. I'll even open up my home folder. You can see it pop up behind me. So, and that's something you can't do with RDP, because once you do an RDP connection into a Windows machine, the remote user can't see it. So that's another benefit of using a Linux terminal, but I digress. But as I was saying, now I've also made the commitment that I want to take my company to start using Linux on our desktop. And we have settled we're going to use Linux Mint 19. But give you an example, Linux Mint 19 doesn't have the remote desktop sharing in it. I'm sure you can add it on, but I thought it would be part of Linux Mint 19. It's not. So I imagine they're still getting there. They're getting Linux Mint 19 there, but it's a pretty interface. It's fast. It works really well on that i5 behind me. And but moving to Linux is a process. It's not something I'm going to sit down one day and go, today is the day I move over to Linux. No. That machine behind me is the training machine. I need to be able to do video editing. That's one of the reasons it drove me to Linux. But I have to learn how to use Kdenlive like I can use Adobe Premiere. And until that happens, I can't make the switch. So Windows is still my daily driver. We are still committed to switching to Linux, but I want to make damn sure I'm familiar with it before I convert everything over. So there you go. What do you think? What do you think? Would you be opposed to using Linux is a thin client, stretching a few more years. I know 10 years for a PC is a long time, but again, I'm the king of cheap, and if they're, as long as they're running and they're repairable, why not keep using them, right? Why not put them? I'd rather not see them go into a landfill. But say, for example, you work for a not-for-profit organization. There's no reason why people in a nonprofit or a church organization, or even schools for that matter, who cares about the operating system? Why not use Linux if it works and gets what you want done? Really, the skills people need on computers are being able to browse the internet, create Word and Excel documents, but you can do that in Linux as well. Hell, most people are using Google. A lot of small businesses are using Google Docs. Not something I'm fond of. I would never. I'm opposed to putting my data out on somebody else's computers, but that's me. But this gives us an opportunity again to stretch my customers' dollars, and anytime I can do that, it makes me a very happy person. Well, there you go. That's it. I hope you found the video entertaining and informative. As always, don't let Linux intimidate you. Try it out for yourself. See if you feel the same way about it I do. And we appreciate your patronage and coming to see these videos. Leave your comments down in the comment section. Please give us a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. And remember, with YouTube, it's not enough to subscribe. You have to hit the notification bell if you're going to be notified of new videos. Just a little announcement. We are no longer on Twitter. Sorry, Twitter, but just it got to be too much trouble, more trouble than it's worth. So you'll have to look on the YouTube channel or on our Facebook page at Unky Joe's Playhouse for updates as to when we're going to live stream and things like that. And I will not be going back to Twitter this time, but we're not going to discuss that. Donate if you're so inclined. We take PayPal and Patreon. And please don't forget that I will see you on the other side.